Sergeant Arms, please secure the doors. Members, please take your seats. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. President.
All right, this morning we are pleased to have Rabbi Mendy Rivkin of the Chabad Jewish Center of Towson, Maryland, guest of the distinguished senator from District 42. Members, please rise for the invocation.
Good morning. It's my honor to join the Senate again this year. It's been quite a year for us here in Maryland, for us in District 42 and in all the districts here in Maryland, for us in the entire United States, and for honestly all the citizens of the entire world. We've all done the best we can, and with God's grace, we've done pretty well in many instances. It's my honor to start this session with a prayer, and I would like to start by highlighting one thing that it talks about in this week's Torah portion. It says in the Bible, which the Jews read, it's segmented by week. It says, Acharei Rabim Lahatos, if somebody comes to a court and they have to ask the court for an opinion, and the court gives them an opinion and there's a disagreement between some of the judges. When the court does render its opinion, when it comes out of the court should be true for us as we sit together as senators, or as you guys sit together as senators here in the Capitol. There are many, oftentimes, disagreements between different members of the Senate on various aspects. But once the government votes and rules, this is the law for all citizens of Maryland, and we all try to live by it. May it be, finish with the prayer, may it be the will of God that we find within us the strength that all the actions that we take, both that we agree and that we don't agree with, we should find a way that it should be actions that are uplifting for the citizens we are cared to and honored and responsible to take care of and to legislate for. May it be laws that help uplift them, help make their life easier, and may we be proper guides and proper shepherds for our citizens and for those that we are responsible to take on the duty of serving them. Amen.
Excellent. Chair recognizes the senator from the 42nd District.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to move that we journalize that wonderful prayer.
Without objection, we will most certainly journalize the rabbi's excellent and unifying remarks this morning. All right. Any announcements? Announcements? No? All right. Well, then let's go ahead and start. Yes. Oh, we have to do the board. Let's go ahead and take the call on presence. Clerk will take the call. With 43 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland is now in session. Chair recognizes the senator from the 30th District.
Yes, Mr. President, on an announcement, and then I also believe there's a resolution on the desk. Announcement is the chair of the Anne Arundel County delegation will be meeting on Monday at 1 p.m. To discuss a number of bills. So Anne Arundel County senators, Monday at 1 p.m. over Zoom.
All right, Senator, does the senator have a resolution?
I do. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator may proceed.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, when we think of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, we think of blue crabs, striped bass, oysters. We think of the report card the Bay gets annually. We think of tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of Maryland school children who benefit from on-the-water experiences over the last few decades. We also think of CEO Will Baker. And today we wanted to take a moment and honor Mr. Baker for his decades of service to the Bay Foundation and to this state upon his retirement. So, Mr. President, I ask that the resolution be read across the desk.
Clerk will read the resolution.
Be it hereby known to all that the Senate of Maryland offers its sincerest congratulations to Mr. William C. Baker in recognition of your leadership for more than 40 years as the president of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. With tireless commitment and unfaltering tenacity, you have championed policies to restore one of the nation's greatest estuaries. The membership extends its best wishes on this memorable occasion and directs this resolution to be presented on the 26th day of February 2021.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? If so, the clerk will take the call. The Senate of Maryland unanimously celebrates and thanks the 40 years of service as the president of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, Mr. William C. Baker. We thank you for your service.
Can you hear
And
me?
Mr. Baker, please, I think you have a few words you'd like to say to the Senate.
Yes, President Ferguson, Senator Elfreth, every member of this great body, thank you very much. This is an extraordinary honor for me and for the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. For decades, the Maryland Senate has supported saving the Bay. It has been fundamental to Maryland's success. Without your steadfast leadership, this national treasure would be less treasure and more disgrace. We at CBF are grateful beyond words. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Baker. We deeply appreciate you, your work, your service, and the organization to protect our state's most valuable resource. Thank you very much. Excellent. All right. Well, we start on a high note, and let's. If there are there any other announcements? Any other announcements? No. All right. Let's, without objection, so be considered the reading of the journal from the prior legislative day. Let's go ahead and get some of our administrative stuff. We've got some new bills, Senate bills. This is new Senate bills number 29. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 948, Senator Klossmeyer, Veterans Affairs, Office of Communications and Public Affairs, Veterans Advocacy and Education Act rules.
Next order of business is the introduction of Senate bond initiatives. This is calendar 21. Clerk will read the bond initiatives.
Senator McCray, Philemon Ministry Step Up House. Senator McCray, Artistic Laborers in Visual Exaltation.
Majority Leader moves so we consider the reading of the bond initiatives. We have some House bills, first reading House bills. This is the 6th calendar of them. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 101, Delegate Chakardian, Human Services, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, Heat and Eat Program, and Study on Maryland Energy Assistance Program eligibility.
Majority Leader moves so be considered the reading of the bills. Somebody having a sound issue over here? Oh, it's construction. Okay. That was an odd construction sound. I think the plexiglass has turned, it sounds like a horn. All right. Let's see. Next, we've got a message from the governor. Clerk will read the message.
Dear Mr. President, pursuant to the authority conferred on me by Article 3, Section 52, Subsection 5 of the Constitution of Maryland, and in accordance with the consent of the House of Delegates duly granted, I hereby submit Supplemental Budget Number 2 to House Bill 588 and Senate Bill 491 in the form of an amendment to the budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020. Supplemental Budget Number 2 affects the previously estimated funds available for budget operations as shown in the following summary statement. Sincerely, Lawrence J. Hogan, Jr., Governor.
Message having been read is now journalized. The supplemental budget will be referred to this Committee on Budget and Taxation. All right, before we jump into proceedings, just want to talk logistics quickly and timing. So today we are planned to have a 5 p.m. afternoon session. There's been a sense of exhaustion from folks. There have been a lot of late nights. And so the thought is that if we can get far enough along today and we can get things moving today, then we may be able to potentially not do a 5 p.m. session. To do that, the hope would be we want to make sure that we get the bills that are coming out of JPR on the floor to be laid over so that there can be any questions, clarifying questions, things that are issues that come up so that members have time throughout the weekend and Monday to look through the bill, get questions answered, any clarifying issues. request amendments during that period of time, and so that we would be able to take it up in earnest on Tuesday. So if we get those going and we're able to kind of get through that calendar and get through the majority of the day, hopefully we may be able to call it then. I know some committees have some bill hearings afterwards, but we may avoid a 5 p.m. session so that we can get a little bit of rest before the week happens anew next week. So that is the sense of timing. Just want to kind of give that out there as we progress today. So let's go ahead and get started. And without objection, we're going to start with this judicial proceedings calendar so we can get it onto the floor. This is report of the Committee on Judicial Proceedings, report number 6. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 71, Senator Signor, Police Officers Testimony, Presumption of Inadmissibility, Maryland Police Accountability Act of 2021, favorable with 2 amendments.
Yes, actually, Senator, before we do that, does the Chair of Judicial Proceedings want to add anything about the calendar, and then we'll go to the floor leader of the bill?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. President. Just to reiterate, we'll read them all over across the desk today, but then we'll have them laid over until the session next week. But before we start today's proceedings, we're not going to start with the speeches as to why this is a critical moment in our history and our time and the importance of the work that we did in the committee. But I do just want to applaud and commend the committee process and the committee members on both sides of the aisle. The legislation, of the 9 bills that have come out, 5 were unanimous, 6 had bipartisan support, and everyone contributed mightily to this process and the product that we have before you. The bills and the package represent, I think, the most transformative and consequential reform that helps bridge the gap between how we do policing in Maryland and trust in the communities that they serve that we've seen in over 4 decades. I'm tremendously proud of the committee product, and I just want to say thank you to our committee members who have put in hours and hours, over 30 hours of voting. We've been working on these issues since the summer. And so I just wanted to say to the committee members, thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. President, for your support in making this a priority. And before I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you to the JPR committee staff and to DLS, because I know that we've been working some extremely late nights, and especially our committee counsel, Jamie Lancaster, an incredible feat that he's been able to perform over the last 3 weeks, running on almost no sleep, responding to requests, providing our committee with critical analysis. I can't tell you how impressed I am with DLS and the caliber of staff that we have here helping us make policy in Maryland. So just with that, Mr. President, I wanted to say thank you, and we'll get into more of the speeches as to why we're in this critical moment in time, but at that, I'll just say thank you, Mr. President, for the time to explain, and we'll get on with it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Let's jump right in. Chair recognizes the sponsor of the bill on Senate Bill 71 as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, Senate Bill 71, as amended, creates a rebuttable presumption regarding the testimony of police officers who are required to wear body camera. Under the bill, intentional failure of the police officer to activate a body-worn camera in violation of the policy of the officers employing law enforcement agency creates a rebuttable presumption that any testimony of the police officer relating to that incident that was not recorded is inadmissible in a criminal prosecution. The presumption may be rebutted by showing that the body-worn camera was not activated due to a malfunction of the camera, that the police officer was not aware of the malfunction or was not able to repair the malfunction prior to the incident, and the law enforcement agency's documentation shows that the officer checked the camera's functionality at the beginning of the officer's shift, or 2, that it was unsafe, impractical, or impossible for the police officer to activate the body-worn camera. The bill's provision applied to a police officer who is required by the officers employing law enforcement agency to use a body-worn camera while on duty. The bill also requires that certain law enforcement agencies require the use of body cameras on or before July 1st, 2023, and that any law enforcement agency of a county besides the aforementioned agencies that require the use of body-worn cameras before or on July 1st, 2025, and that those agencies develop a written policy for the use of body-worn cameras consistent with the policy published by the Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission. Finally, the bill establishes a task force on statewide body camera implementation. There were 2 amendments. Amendment number 1 is a technical amendment. that makes changes to the title and purposes. And amendment number 2 clarifies the rebuttable presumption that I had spoken about earlier, which, in my opinion, it met and was able, once it was presented and accepted, it brought the state's attorneys on board who I believe voiced the loudest concerns. So with that, I almost forgot, the committee vote was unanimous. Mr. President, I move the adoption of the favorable with amendments committee report.
All right, the floor leaders move for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. Question is on the 2 committee amendments. Are there any questions about the amendments? If not, I think we'll entertain a motion to lay the bill over. But let's see if there are any questions before we do the layover. Any clarifying questions? It appears not. Chair recognizes the chair of the committee.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd just like to make a motion to lay the bill over.
Senator's
Bill and
motion-
the amendments lie over under the rules.
Senator's motion is in order. The bill and the amendment will be laid over under the rule. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 74, Senator Washington, Police Officers, Mental Health, Employee Assistance Programs, favorable with 2 amendments.
All right, Chair recognizes Senator from Baltimore City and County as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President, colleagues. Senate Bill 74, as amended, the bill requires each law enforcement agency to provide access to an employee assistance program for all police officers that the law enforcement agency employs, and develops a policy to provide access to required services at no cost to a police officer. The bill establishes requirements for the employee assistance program and for law enforcement agencies. There were 2 amendments. Amendment number 1 was technical. Amendment number 2 alters the provision of the law requiring the law enforcement agency to establish a confidential and non-punitive early intervention program. It alters the requirements of the employee assistance program under the bill. It requires the law enforcement agency to develop a policy to provide access to services required under the bill at no cost to the police officer. As mentioned in the aforementioned bill, this bill was also voted out of our committee unanimously. Mr. President, I move the amended bill, the bill as amended favorable in the favorable committee report.
Floor leaders move for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. Questions on the amendments? Any questions, clarifying questions, or discussion on the amendments? If not, the chair recognizes the chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd make a motion that the bill and the 2 amendments lie over under the rules.
The senator's motion is in order. The bill and the amendments will be laid over under the rule. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 178, Senator Carter, Public Information Act, Personnel Records, Investigation of Law Enforcement Officers, Anton's Law, favorable with 2 amendments.
Chair recognizes the senator from Baltimore City as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. As amended, this bill establishes that a record relating to an administrative or criminal investigation of misconduct by a law enforcement officer, including an internal affairs investigatory record, a hearing record, and records relating to a disciplinary decision, is not a personnel record for purposes of Maryland's Public Information Act, unless such record is a record of a technical infraction. Thus, such records are not subject to mandatory denial of inspection under the PIA. Instead, they are the subject of discretionary denial as provided under the PIA. However, a custodian may deny inspection by a person of interest only under specified conditions that, under current law, apply to the denial of various investigatory records. The bill must be construed to apply prospectively to any PIA request made on or after the bill's October 1, 2021 effective date, regardless of when the requested record was created. There are 2 committee amendments. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 provides that technical infractions as specified are personnel records. I would move the amended bill.
Senator moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. Question is on the 2 committee amendments. Are there questions on the amendments? If not, chair recognizes the chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd make a motion that the bill and 2 amendments lie under the rules.
Senator's motion is in order. The bill and the amendments will be laid over under the rule. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 419, Senator Carter, no Knox warrants, elimination, favorable with 3 amendments.
Chair recognizes Chair of the Committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. As amended, this bill alters provisions of the law relating to the application and the issuance and execution of search warrants, authorizing the executing a law enforcement officer to enter the building, apartment, premises, place, or thing specified in the warrant to be searched without giving notice of the officer's authority or purpose. The bill establishes requirements for information that must be contained in the application for such warrants and alters the period of time in which these warrants must be executed after the date of issuance, subject to a specified exception. The bill also establishes requirements specified in the law enforcement officers executing these warrants and establishes a reporting requirement. There are 3 committee amendments. 1 is technical. Number 2 alters and establishes the provisions of the bill relating to the application for issuance and execution of specified warrants and establishes requirements for execution of no-knock warrants. And amendment number 3 establishes a reporting requirement. Mr. President, move for the adoption of the favorable committee report and the 3 committee amendments.
Floor leaders move for the adoption of the 3 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. Questions on the amendments? Questions or discussions on the bill, the amendments? If not, Chair recognizes the Chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that the bill and the 3 committee amendments lie over under the rules.
Senator's motion is in order. The bill and the amendments will be laid over under the rule. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 599, Senator Smith, Public Safety Surplus Military Equipment, Prohibition on Purchase by Law Enforcement Agencies, favorable with 2 amendments.
Chair recognizes Vice Chair of the Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. As amended, this bill prohibits a law enforcement agency from receiving the following equipment from a surplus program operated by the federal government: a weaponized aircraft, drone, or vehicle, a destructive device such as a grenade or a missile, a firearm silencer, or a grenade launcher. Amendment number 1 adds sponsors and alters the title. Amendment number 2 alters the list of equipment a law enforcement agency is prohibited from receiving from a surplus program. Mr. President, this bill moved unanimously through our committee. I move the amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. Questions on the amendments? Any discussion? If not, Chair of the Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Make a motion for the bill and the 2 committee amendments to lie under the rules.
The Senator's motion is in order. The bill and the amendment will be laid over under the rule. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 600, Senator Smith, Office of the Attorney General, Investigation and Prosecution of Death caused by police officers, favorable with 2 amendments.
Chair recognizes the Senator from Baltimore County as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. As amended, in the case of an alleged incident involving the death of a person caused by a law enforcement officer, this bill requires a state's attorney having jurisdiction to prosecute, but who chooses not to prosecute the officer, to transmit a copy of the investigatory file and other relevant information to the Office of State Prosecutor within 10 days of the decision not to prosecute, and authorizes the state prosecutor to prosecute the officer if the state prosecutor determines that prosecution is appropriate. The bill also establishes a task force on independent investigations involving deaths caused by law enforcement officers. There are 2 committee amendments. The first is technical and makes changes to the title of the bill, purpose paragraph, and function paragraph. The second amendment strikes provisions of the original bill requiring law enforcement agencies to report any alleged incident involving the death of a person caused by a law enforcement officer to the Attorney General, and authorizing the Attorney General to investigate the incident, and replaces them with provisions requiring a state's attorney to transmit information to the Office of the State Prosecutor, and authorizing the state prosecutor to prosecute the officer. The amendment also creates the task force and requires it to develop a blueprint for independent investigations of incidents, make recommendations for an independent agency to investigate incidents, and submit a report to the General Assembly and Governor. The vote on this bill was unanimous. I move the adoption of the amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. Questions on the amendments? Discussion, questions on the amendments? If not, the chair recognizes does the floor leader have a motion?
Yes, Mr. President, because there are amendments, I move that the bill be laid over.
The Senator's motion is in order. The bill and the amendment will be laid over under the rule. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 626, Senator Carter, Law Enforcement Officers' Use of Force, favorable with 2 amendments.
Chair recognizes the Senator from Baltimore City as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. As amended, this bill establishes a statewide standard on use of force and establishes various criminal prohibitions and penalties relating to a law enforcement officer's intentional use of force, failure to make a reasonable attempt to intervene, to terminate or prevent another law enforcement officer's use of excessive force, failure to provide or make efforts to obtain medical treatment, or failure to report specified misconduct by another law enforcement officer as specified. The amended bill also provides that the Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission may suspend or revoke the certification of a law enforcement officer under certain specified circumstances, and provides specified whistleblower protections for law enforcement officers who report the specified information. By July 1, 2022, each local law enforcement agency must establish, maintain, and implement specified policies and guidance for law enforcement agencies and include funds in its annual budget for specified training and assessments. Each local law enforcement agency must also report to the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth, and Victim Services data regarding the use of force as specified for inclusion in a report to be analyzed and summarized in an annual report by that office. Further, by December 31st, 2021, and by each December 31st thereafter, the MPTSC must review a representative sample of specified policies adopted by local law enforcement agencies, even if a law enforcement agency is not in compliance. MPTSC must notify the executive director and the controller. The local law enforcement agency may not receive funds administered through the State Aid for Police Protection Fund if not in compliance within the grace period. The amended bill applies prospectively. There are two committee amendments. Amendment number 1 is technical and strikes provisions of the bill, including provisions related to specified civilian actions and definitional language, and alters prohibitions under the bill relating to the use of excessive force, duty to intervene and report, and duty to provide or obtain medical treatment. Also makes changes to, this is amendment number 2. Amendment number 1 is technical. This is amendment number 2. Amendment number 2, it alters prohibitions under the bill relating to the use of excessive force, duty to intervene and report, and duty to provide or obtain medical treatment, and also makes changes to requirements for policy establishment requirements, data reporting requirements. It authorizes the suspension or revocation of an officer's certification under specified circumstances and establishes whistleblower protections as specified, and makes various technical, stylistic, and conforming changes. I would move the amendments and favorable committee report. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Florida moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. Question is on the two committee amendments. Are there any questions on the amendments? Chair recognizes questions on the amendments? If not, Chair recognizes Chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just make a motion that the bill and the two committee amendments lie over under the rules.
Senator's motion is in order. The bill and the amendments will be laid over under the rule. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 627, Senator Carter, Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights, Repeal and Procedures for Discipline. Favorable with 16 amendments. This is an emergency bill.
Chair recognizes Chair of the committee as the floor leader.
16 amendments. All right. Thank you, Mr. President. As amended, this emergency bill repeals the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights and establishes procedures as the exclusive methods for disciplining specified law enforcement officers. The bill applies prospectively and may not be applied or interpreted to have any effect on or application to 1. Any bona fide collective bargaining agreement entered into or on before the bill's emergency effective date for the duration of the contract term, excluding any extensions, options to extend, or renewals of the term of the original contract, or 2, a disciplinary matter against a law enforcement officer based on the alleged misconduct occurring before the bill's emergency effective date if a hearing board has been convened in the matter. There are 16 committee amendments. Amendment number 1 is technical and makes changes to the short title, purpose, paragraph, and function paragraph. Amendment number 2 is technical and makes changes to the section number on the bill. Amendment number 3 alters the bill's preemption and collective bargaining provisions. Amendment number 4 provides that a law enforcement officer has the same rights to engage in political activity as a state employee, except that this right does not apply when the officer is acting in an official capacity. The amendment provides that a law enforcement agency may not prohibit secondary employment by an officer, but may adopt reasonable regulations on the secondary employment. The amendment prohibits an officer from being required to disclose certain information unless information is necessary to investigate a possible conflict of interest. The amendment provides that an officer may not be discriminated against because the officer exercised any rights under the bill or any constitutional right that a statute or agency regulation may abridge, the right of an officer to bring suit arising out of the officer's duties, and that the officer may waive rights under the bill in writing. Finally, the amendment allows the officer to have a formal complaint against them expunged under certain circumstances, and that a complaint against the officer may not be admissible in a judicial or administrative proceeding under those circumstances. Amendment number 5 specifies that an allegation of misconduct by an officer may be conducted by a sworn officer or a person who is not an officer who has received certain training administered by the Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission. Amendment number 6 strikes provisions requiring that before an officer subject to discipline may give a copy to the investigative file and any exclusionary information, the officer may agree to pay cost of creating the copy. The amendment also removes the provision providing that a written summary may be provided if the investigative file cannot be provided. Amendment number 7 strikes provisions of the bill authorizing a county or a local government to adopt a law establishing an oversight body to impose discipline on the law enforcement officers under the Bill of Rights, under the bill. Amendment number 8 adds the bill as a definition of the term minor policy violation and clarifies that the bill does not limit the authority of a chief to create an alternative voluntary disciplinary process for minor policy violations. The amendment also clarifies that the bill does not limit the authority of a chief to transfer and reassign an officer if the action is not punitive in nature. Amendment number 9 strikes the bill's provisions allowing the state court administrator to enforce a subpoena issued as a part of an investigation under the bill. Amendment number 6 clarifies the deadlines by which the police chief must determine whether to impose discipline or conduct continued investigation after the hearing is held. Amendment number 11 strikes from the bill's provisions clarifying that placing an officer on leave without pay when the officer is absent without approval or requiring an officer to make restitution for damage caused by the officer's negligence are not disciplinary actions under the bill. Amendment number 12 clarifies that the law enforcement agency must investigate any allegation of misconduct by an officer unless the alleged misconduct relates to a criminal offense for which the officer was convicted or received probation before judgment, and the offense was committed in the execution of the officer's duties or bears on the officer's credibility, integrity, or honesty. The amendment also strikes a provision requiring the chief to review the entire investigative file before imposing disciplinary action in such circumstances. Amendment number 13 clarifies that under the certain provisions and circumstances, a chief must order a hearing under the bill before imposing discipline if an officer requests one. Amendment number 14 provides that an officer may request and a chief shall order a hearing to make findings of fact, recommend discipline, and that a chief shall appoint a hearing board of one sworn officer, 2 trained civilians who had no part in the investigation of the officer. The amendment also clarifies that a hearing board shall prepare written findings of fact and recommend disciplinary action, and that a chief may not alter the hearing board's findings of fact, including the determination of whether the officer committed the offense. Amendment number 15 clarifies the definition of a law enforcement officer. And finally, amendment number 16 requires that a police chief to transmit certain information to the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth, and Victim Services regarding investigations of alleged misconduct. Mr. President, with that, I'd ask for the adoption of the favorable committee report and the 16 committee amendments.
The floor leader moves for the adoption of the 16 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. Before we go there, the Senator, could the Senator with 16 amendments give it just a high level, the amended bill as it comes out of the committee? What are the high level points of what this bill does as amended?
Certainly, Mr. President. So 16 amendments, but the high level of what this bill does, it repeals the current Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights, which has been on the books since 1974 and does three things essentially. One is it infuses civilians into the oversight process for the civilian board. 2 civilians, 1 law enforcement officer of equal or higher rank if there's a disciplinary matter. 2, it allows the chief to take a single node of responsibility. It allows the chief to take action and be held responsible for policing the force, if you will. And the third is that it says that, look, no jurisdiction can collectively bargain for disciplinary matters regarding policing. So it removes that ability for all 24 jurisdictions to do that, takes the collective bargaining process off of the table.
All right. The question is on the amendments. Discussion, questions, clarifications? Not, Chair recognizes the chairman.
Thank you, Mr. President. With that, I'd ask that the bill and the 16 committee amendments lie over under the rules.
The senator's motion is in order. The bill and the amendments will be laid over under the rule. Senators, just a reminder, as this calendar, as you're doing work this weekend, please reach out to the chair, to members of the committee, to committee staff to get any clarifications that come up, so that there's plenty of time. We don't want to rush it, but we want to make sure that we are diligent. We want to make sure there's at least 3 days here to get through any clarifications as folks are looking at potential amendments or issues that arise. So, all right. With that, let's move on to our next order of business. Let's see. We have a message from the House that we just received. This is message number 1. Senate bill is passed by the ayes and nays. Clerk, read the message.
Senate Bill 218, Senator King, Income Tax, Child Tax Credit, and Expansion of the Earned Income Credit. This is an emergency bill.
All right. This is just the message of the ayes and nays, so message having been read is considered journalized. Next order of business is a report, second reader report on the Committee on Budget and Taxation. This is report number 7. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 2, Senator McCray, Maryland Environmental Service Reform Act of 2021, favorable with 2 amendments.
Chair recognizes the senator from Baltimore City as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 2, as amended, makes overreaching changes to the governance and administration of the Maryland Environmental Services, MES. I'm going to discuss the bill and its amendments together. The composition and operations of MES board. The bill, as introduced, altered the composition of MES board by removing the MES director, deputy director, secretary, and treasurer from the board. The bill adds the state treasurer to the board and requires the board secretary and treasurer to be selected from the board members. Finally, this bill creates transparency rules around board meetings. The amendments renames the director to be the executive director and makes the executive director a non-voting member of the board. Allows the state treasurer to designate someone to serve on the board in the place of the state treasurer. Requires the executive director to present expenses over $500 to the board. Establishes a review process for the executive director and the board. Prohibits any board, the board under certain circumstances from awarding a severance package. Procurement and spending restrictions. MES is currently exempt from the general requirement that the Board of Public Works, BPW, approves certain state contracts. The bill requires BPW approval of certain MES contracts over $250,000. In addition, the bill requires MES board to approve the MES expenses over $25,000. The amendments increase the approval threshold to $200,000 and requires MES to notify the board of any expenditure in excess of $25,000. It creates it has the board, the MES, the agency, would now have a diversity officer. They also have to make sure that with their the amendments authorize DBM to specify how MES budget is to be submitted. In addition, the amendments require MES advertise open positions and use a competitive interview process to make their decisions. The bill requires the board to adopt policies governing the severance packages, bonuses, tuition, expense reimbursements, workforce diversity, whistleblower complaints, travel, and etc. It also adds clarity to their collective bargaining process. The bill adds MES employees to the list of employees to whom the state's collective bargaining provisions of law apply. The amendments authorize the State Labor Relations Board to designate bargaining units for employees of MES, and also under current Attorney General is the legal advisor for MES of the board. With the approval of AG, and MES may employ additional counsel. The bill requires MES to obtain board approval before hiring additional counsel. Move adoptions of the committee report, Mr. President.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. Question is on the 2 committee amendments. Any discussion on the amendments? If not, all in favor of the amendment say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the favorable committee report as amended. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 2 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reader. Senators, just want to give a quick note to thank the members from both sides of the aisle, from the Joint Committee on Fair Practices and State Personnel Oversight. This was a tough issue that arose this summer. They've been doing some heavy lifting to really understand how to make sure that this really important agency can operate as efficiently and transparently as possible. So I want to thank them and thank the bill sponsor for helping to put this together. I think we're doing some good work here today. All right. Next up, we've got the Committee on Finance. We have 3 reports from Finance. Let's go ahead and start with report number 9. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 52, Senator Washington, Public Health, Maryland Commission on Health Equity, the Shirley Nathan Pulliam Health Equity Act of 2021, favorable with 2 amendments.
Chair recognizes the chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 52 establishes the Maryland Commission on Health Equity to 1, employ a health equity framework and specified examinations. 2, provide advice on issues of racial, ethnic, cultural, or socioeconomic health disparities. 3, facilitate coordination of expertise and experience in developing a comprehensive health equity plan addressing the social determinants of health. And 4, sets goals for health equity and prepare a plan for the state to achieve health equity in alignment with other statewide planning activities. The Commission must submit an annual report, and the 2023 report must include findings and recommendations on the health effects occurring in the state as a result of specified factors. Amendment 1 strikes the preamble. Amendment 2 adds 2 members to the Commission and expands the list of topics that the Commission must examine to include food insecurity. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. Questions on the amendments? Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the amendment say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the favorable committee report as amended. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 52 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reader. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 135, Senator Klossmeyer, Business Regulation, Battery Charge Fence Security Systems Regulation, favorable.
Chair recognizes the Senator from Baltimore County as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the Senate. Senate Bill 135 defines a battery charge fence system as a security system and further specifies that a battery charge fence system transmits a signal to alert an owner or law enforcement, has an energizer, is located behind an existing non-electric perimeter fence or wall on property that is not zoned as residential use, has specified height requirements compared to the perimeter fence or wall, and is marked with warning signs. The bill authorizes local governments to require compliance with a local alarm ordinance or permit and require an installer to submit an affidavit containing a specified information. Local governments may also inspect the newly installed system. Local governments, however, may not impose any additional installation or permit requirements. There are no amendments, there is no fiscal impact, and I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Questions on the report? Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 135 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reader. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 153, Senator Eckhart, Renewable Energy Portfolio Standard, Municipal Electric Utilities, favorable with 1 amendment.
The chair recognizes the senator from the Upper Eastern Shore as the floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Senate Bill 153 limits the annual Tier 1 percentage requirements of the state's Renewable Energy Portfolio Standard for municipal electric utilities. The bill also requires municipal electric utilities to purchase Tier 2 renewable energy credits in the year 2021. The amendment adds sponsors. I move the amendment and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 1 committee amendment and the favorable committee report. Questions on the amendment? Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the amendment say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the favorable committee report as amended. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 153 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 168, Senator Eckhart, Public Health, Maryland Suicide Fatality Review Committee, favorable with 2 amendments.
Chair recognizes Senator from District 5 as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. And of course, all of my colleagues, we all know that the issue of suicide has been a problem for many years, but we've particularly seen it acutely in this last year as folks' mental health has really suffered, and there's been a lot of struggle in our communities. Senate Bill 168 establishes the Maryland Suicide Fatality Review Committee to identify and address the factors contributing to suicide deaths and facilitate system changes in the state to prevent suicide deaths. Maryland Department of Health must provide staff for the committee. There are 2 committee amendments. Amendment number 1 makes changes to the purpose paragraph. Amendment number 2 alters the membership of the committee and requires that the committee coordinate its activities with other fatality review teams in order to ensure efficiency in the work of all the teams. There was no opposition at the committee hearing, so I would move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report, Mr. President.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of 2 committee amendments in the favorable committee report. Question on the amendments. Any discussion? Yes, Chair recognizes Minority Leader.
Yes, the floor leader yield.
The floor leader, Senator, may proceed.
I apologize, I haven't got a chance to read this completely. On this review committee, was there anything on there dealing with veteran suicide that somebody would be on there, or is that not applicable in this bill?
That is a great question. Just a moment. Yes. There is, it is not specifically mentioned, but there is a lot of discretion given to the members of the committee to appoint a wide variety of people depending on what's needed. And I am sure that that will be an issue that's looked at.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right, question remains on the 2 amendments. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the amendment say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the favorable committee report as amended. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 168 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 185, Senator Kagan, Financial Institutions, Security Questions and Measures, favorable.
Chair recognizes the Vice Chair of the committee as the
Thank
floor
you,
leader.
Mr. President. Senate Bill 185 requires a financial institution to allow a customer to choose from at least 2 security question options for each security question if the customer is required to provide an answer to a security question in connection with the provision of an account. The bill applies prospectively and does not apply to any customer accounts created before its October 1st, 2021 effective date. Mr. President, there are no amendments, no fiscal impact. There was 0 opposition to the committee hearing. Move adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 185 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 204, Senator Bidle, Healthcare Facilities, Assisted Living Programs, Memory Care, and Alzheimer's Disease Unit Regulations, favorable with 3 amendments.
Chair recognizes the Senator from Anne Arundel as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 204's amendment requires that the Maryland Department of Health to adopt regulations for memory care units within assisted living programs. Specifically, the regulations will cover staff training requirements for direct care staff and administrators and a staffing pattern standard for direct care staff. Amendment 1 alters the title and is technical. Amendment number 2 is technical and eliminates the mandated regulatory requirements. And Amendment number 3 requires the Maryland Department of Health to adopt by December 1st, 2022, general regulations regarding the regulation of assisted living programs that have been under consideration by the department for at least 5 years or more. There's no fiscal impact. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
All right, floor leader moves to the adoption of the 3 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. Questions on the amendments? Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the amendment say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The three committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the favorable committee report as amended. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 204 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. Let's move over to the Finance Committee report number 10. The clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 428, Senator Kelly, Public Utilities Annual Reports, favorable.
Chair recognizes Chair of the Committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 428 alters the due dates for certain annual reports required of the Public Service Commission and the Department of Housing and Community Development to increase administrative efficiency. The contents of the reports are unchanged. There are no amendments, no fiscal impact, no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 428 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 429, Senator Kelly, for hire driving and vehicle requirements, favorable.
Chair recognizes Chair of the Committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 429 makes administrative changes to the for-hire driver's license application process. It removes a requirement for Baltimore City taxicabs to complete an education course, modernizes requirements related to the display of information on taxicabs, and removes taxicabs from the list of motor vehicles not required to have seat belts. Provisions related to passenger limousines that carry 15 or fewer passengers are expanded to encompass all for-hire motor vehicles of the same size. There are no amendments, no fiscal impact, no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Questions on the report? Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 429 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 430, Senator Kelly, Public Service Commission, virtual public hearings, favorable. This is an emergency bill.
Chair recognizes Chair of the Committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 430 authorizes the Public Service Commission to hold virtual public hearings on applications for utility rate increases and certificates of public convenience and necessity. Appropriate public notice and opportunity to participate are required. This is particularly important during this period when people are so impacted by the pandemic. There are no amendments, no fiscal impact, no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Questions on the report? Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 430 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 466, Senator West, certificates for involuntary admission, license, certified social worker, clinical, favorable with two amendments.
Chair recognizes the senator from Prince George's as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 466, as amended, authorizes a licensed certified social worker, clinical, or a licensed clinical professional counselor in conjunction with a physician to certify an individual for involuntary admission to a facility or a Veterans Administration hospital, and to certify a minor for admission to a facility. Amendment 1 alters the purpose paragraph. Amendment 2 expands the bill to apply to the admission of a minor and adds licensed clinical professional counselors. There is no fiscal impact. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of two committee amendments in the favorable committee report. Questions on the two committee amendments? Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the amendment say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the favorable committee report as amended. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 466 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 499, Senator Lamb, prohibition on vending machine sales of drugs and medicines, repeal, favorable.
Chair recognized by Chair of the committee as the floor
Mr.
leader.
President. Senate Bill 109 allows the sale of over-the-counter drugs and pharmaceuticals in a vending machine by repealing the current prohibition on the sale of these items in the Health General article. Any medicine that requires a prescription or that is required by federal state law to be only sold behind the counter would still only be available behind the counter in the pharmacy. The bill would allow Maryland to become the 47th state to allow the sale of over-the-counter medications in vending machines. To be clear, we're one of only 4 states that still have this rather antiquated prohibition. This would make us, again, the 47th state now to allow, again, the sale of over-the-counter medications in vending machines. There are no amendments, no fiscal impact. The bill passed the committee unanimously. I move adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Questions on the report? Chair recognizes the minority whip.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'm trying to understand this bill. Maybe you could walk me through it, because I'm looking right now, and the fiscal note says, per COMAR, non-prescription drugs that alleviate pain may be sold by a vending machine already. So what is this bill trying to capture?
Okay, so this is pretty straightforward. We have over-the-counter drugs, which the FDA has said that you can go into your CVS. It's not behind the counter. If it's over the counter, you would now be able to purchase it in a vending machine, as 46 states already do. If it requires a prescription or it's behind the counter, it wouldn't be available in the vending machine. So it depends on what kind of pain medication. There are some, again, that you can walk into a pharmacy. It's out there for everybody to purchase, and you don't have to go up to the counter. So that's what this bill would allow. So it does depend. Is it FDA approved over the counter, or does it require a prescription and it's behind the counter? And again, we would be the 47th state to allow this. We just have this prohibition, one of 4 states left. And let me also add, this is particularly good when you think about access. I mean, you may be in communities where a pharmacy's, quite honestly, not that convenient. Some of our rural communities. It would also allow pharmacies to have access 24 hours. Let's say it's 3 in the morning, and the pharmacies in your area aren't open 24 hours. So from an access standpoint, this actually makes a great deal of sense. You're only accessing drugs that are FDA approved over the counter already. And this, again, I think makes a lot of sense. I'm surprised it took us this long to get on board with the 46 other states.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out, because before I came down here, I pulled the testimony, I'm looking at it, and I mean, trust me, I understand. It looks like right now you can sell Tylenol in vending machines. After some of our JPR voting sessions, I'd be glad if we had some Tylenol downstairs at a vending machine.
There you go. In fact, we do have, it would be available here in the vending machines in the basement of the State House.
I guess my question is, though, if you can already do these non-prescription pain relieving, so you can already do Tylenol, what exactly, what are we talking about? Like, what are we missing exactly?
Well, I've got the sponsor who's a medical doctor, may want to help me out on this one. But, what constitutes FDA, over the counter versus not, I'm sure
Senator
the FDA. Yeah, I would yield to the doctor, senator, for sure. That could be helpful.
Sponsor the bill?
Sure, Mr. President. Yes. Okay. So this would allow any over-the-counter, and there are a lot of other over-the-counter medications that have been approved by FDA that are not just pain relief medications. So things like antacids, things like eye drops, which may be over-the-counter, and they still have to be approved by FDA because you're obviously putting it in your eye. There are some cough medications that can be over the counter as well, some antifungal medications. So all of these are medications that would otherwise be over the counter, but because they're FDA approved, they otherwise wouldn't be able to be sold. They're not pain medications.
Okay, Mr. President, if it's okay, I would just ask, I'm not generally very familiar with this. What the sponsor of the bill is saying sounds fine. If I could just take a little bit and look over the bill, if we could special order it just until Tuesday.
That's fine. That's fine.
Excellent. Without objection, there are no objections. The special order center special order is approved. We will take up the bill on Tuesday. All right. We've got one more report from Finance. This is number 11. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 503, Senator Smith, Public Utilities, Gas Service, Regulatory Safety, Flower Branch Act, favorable with 2 amendments.
503, Senate Bill 503. Chair recognizes the chair of the committee.
Okay.
Senate Bill 503, as amended, requires gas service regulators to be installed or relocated outside of specified structures, subject to certain requirements and exemptions, by January 1, 2022. By January 1, 2022, each gas company must file a plan with the Public Service Commission to relocate gas service regulators in multifamily residential structures as defined. PSC must issue a final order approving or disapproving each plan by January 1 of 2023. Until the plans are fully implemented, gas companies must update the PSC annually on the progress made in the previous year, and the PSC must in turn report that information to the governor and the General Assembly. Before I go on to tell you that this is a technical bill, it requires a gas company's submission to address prior delays in gas regulator relocations. The two recent explosions in Baltimore City that caused loss of life and a lot of loss of property were because gas companies weren't enforcing the known requirement in the industry that the gas regulators should not be inside of a building. They should be outside, and this is what this is intended to enforce. After a PSC renewal of a relocation plan and expands the factors that the PSC must consider when evaluating whether to exempt a regulator from the bill's requirements. I move the amendments in the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. Questions on the two committee amendments? Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the amendment say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the favorable committee report as amended. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 503 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 507, Senator Kelly, Division of Consumer Protection, Assisted Living Programs, favorable with two amendments.
Chair recognizes the chair of the committee as the floor leader.
Thank you. Senate Bill 507 requires an assisted living program that was appointed as a representative payee for residents to report on the use by or for residents of Social Security benefits and any other government aid or funds to the Consumer Protection Division of the Office of the Attorney General by June 1 of each year. The Office of Healthcare Quality is also required to refer allegations of unfair, abusive, or deceptive trade practices by assisted living programs to the Health Department's Inspector General and the Consumer Protection Division. The bill is technical. The Amendment 1 is technical. Amendment 2 requires the Office of Healthcare Quality to notify the division when it becomes aware that an assisted living program has been appointed as a representative payee and clarifies the process regarding OHCQ's referring an allegation. No fiscal impact, no opposition at the committee hearing. Colleagues, the concern is that many elderly people who are in assisted living tend to be on Medicaid and just to have Social Security or small pensions. Many assisted livings, which are almost unregulated in Maryland, they're not the same as a nursing home, are becoming representative payees, and in some cases required that the person sign over their Social Security check or whatnot to them if they're going to live in the assisted living. Assisted livings are as small as a single bedroom with two people, or they may be very, very large and institutional-like. And so that's what the bill is dealing with. So many seniors who live in assisted living, and we have over 1,600 small ones in Maryland, the person doesn't have help even finding the assisted living entity in many cases. They look around, they talk to people, they find somebody who's willing to take them in, and we don't have regular state inspections. So this is to assist the elderly who often are alone, without resources, without family member or other personal entities assisting them as they move into this institutional setting because they can't live alone. So I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. Questions on the 2 amendments? Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the amendment say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the favorable committee report as amended. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 507 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reader. And just a quick thanks to the chairwoman for her advocacy throughout this pandemic about this assisted living facilities. They had been kind of a lot stuck in the cracks of the crisis, and just appreciate her advocacy for the last 10 months here. All right, clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 542, Senator Eckhart, State Healthcare Facilities Employees Alternative Work Weeks, favorable with 2 amendments. This is an emergency bill.
Chair recognizes the senator from the Upper Eastern Shore as the floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Senate Bill 542 is an emergency bill that allows employees of a state of Maryland health care facility to work an alternative work week rather than the normal 40 hours per week. Instead, these state employees, primarily nurses, would generally work 3 consecutive 12-hour shifts, which is the same schedule that nurses in private sector health care facilities work. The alternative work week must be consistent with any applicable collective bargaining or similar agreement. The emergency legislation enacted last session allowed the governor to order that nurses at state healthcare facilities work an alternative work week. This bill would continue the practice. The 2 amendments are technical and clarifying and conform the state law to the authorization to work an alternative work week. There was no fiscal impact. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. Question on the amendments? Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the amendment say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. Question now is on the favorable committee report as amended. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 542 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reader. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 570, the President, Emergency Services, Exposure to Contagious Diseases and Viruses, Notification and Other Requirements, favorable.
Chair recognizes the floor leader on 570. Chair of the committee is the floor leader. Do we want a special order till later? No rush.
Senate Bill 570, Emergency Services, Exposure to Contagious Diseases and Viruses, Notification and Other Requirements. This bill is an administration bill. It adds the 219 novel coronavirus 219 blah, 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 to the list of contagious diseases or viruses that when diagnosed in a patient by a medical care facility requires a notification to certain emergency services and public safety personnel. Current law requires a medical care facility that diagnoses a contagious disease or virus to notify emergency medical services personnel, firefighters, law enforcement personnel, correctional officers, and other first responders who were in contact with the patient of possible exposure to the disease or virus. The bill also allows medical care facilities that must make the required notification to enter into an agreement with the state-designated health insurance exchange to facilitate the required notification. There are no amendments, no fiscal impact, no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Questions on the report? Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 570 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reader. Clerk will read the next bill. Senate
Bill 913, Senator McCray, Human Services Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, Heat and Eat Program, favorable with 2 amendments.
Good alliteration. Chair recognizes the Senator from Baltimore City as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 913 established a Heat and Eat program and the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, also known as SNAP, for the purpose of examining food access to households that are receiving or eligible for SNAP and determining eligibility for Heat and Eat. The Department of Human Services must apply a standard utility allowance to the shelter deduction used to determine countable gross income for SNAP eligibility. By doing so, a household would be able to purchase additional food under SNAP. There are two amendments that one requires a study of feasibility of automatic eligibility for the Maryland Energy Assistance Program for SNAP households. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move amendments and the adoption of a favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. Question on the amendments? Not. All in favor of the amendment say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the favorable committee report as amended. Any discussion? Not. All in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any amendments, further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 913 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. All right, we're moving along. We're getting there. Next, we're going to go to Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs. This is report number 10. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 150, Senator Signor, Baltimore County Board of Education, election of officers, favorable with two amendments.
Chair recognizes Senator from Baltimore and Howard counties as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 150 is a local bill that alters the number of votes required for the Baltimore County Board of Education to elect a chair and a vice chair by requiring a majority vote of the voting members currently serving instead of majority vote of the total number of members of the board positions. There are two committee amendments. The first amendment makes technical changes to the purpose paragraph. Amendment number 2 increases the number of appointed members of the county board from 4 to 5. It also requires the Baltimore County Executive to appoint the new member from a list of nominees submitted by the Baltimore County School Board Nominating Commission. And lastly, it prohibits a candidate who files for an elected position on the county board from being appointed to the board itself. Move the adoption of the two committee amendments in the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of two committee amendments in the favorable committee report. Questions on the amendments? Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the amendments say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the adoption of the favorable committee report as amended. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 150 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 375, Senator Kagan, agriculture and neonicotinoid pesticide sale and storage, favorable with one amendment.
Chair recognizes the Vice Chair of the committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. The reading clerk did a great job there. Neonicotinoids, as you know, is a pesticide that kill our pollinators. This body passed former Senator Nathan Pulliam's important legislation in 2016. The problem is that it left a loophole that was a little too large and made our bees vulnerable. Our bees help pollinate 71 out of 100 crops that comprise 90% of our food supply. This bill, as amended, just makes it a little bit harder for a consumer to accidentally buy this toxic brand rather than some other kinds that will do the job for them without creating any problems. So we took a modest amendment from the retailers because it said we have to put the neonicotinoid products behind a counter just so that a farmer or another certified applicator can get access, but we want them to have to ask for it. Turns out not every store has an actual counter, so we took out behind the counter. That's what the amendment does. Move the favorable report as amended.
All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. Question first is on the amendment. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the amendment say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the favorable committee report as amended. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 375 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 432, Senator King, public libraries, electronic book licenses, access, favorable with one amendment.
Chair recognizes the senator from Anne Arundel as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 432 has to do with electronic book licenses that we want to make available to our libraries. Those of us who have cell phones and iPads oftentimes will download a book to our device. But the publishers of the books are denying the public libraries access to those same periodicals. If these publishers offer it to the public, this bill requires them to offer it to the libraries for the distribution on their electronic platforms. There are reasonable restrictions on the number of downloads that can be done and the length of time those downloads can be made available to their members. There's one amendment which includes electronic books, so you can listen to your favorite book or magazine or article. No opposition at the hearing. Move the favorable report with the one amendment.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. Any discussion on the amendment? If not, all in favor of the amendment say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the favorable committee report. Chair recognizes the senator from District 38. Nope. All right. Question on the report. All in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 432 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 436, Senator King, Child Care Centers, Teacher Qualifications, favorable.
Chair recognizes the senator from District 38 as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill, SB 436, addresses the serious shortage of daycare providers in Maryland. And it does this by requiring regulations adopted by the State Board of Education regarding the licensing and operation of child care centers to establish probationary employment qualifications for an individual who is applying for the first time to be a child care teacher in a child care center in the state that serves preschool or school-aged children who are at least age 3. There's no fiscal impact, and the committee passed it unanimously, and I move for a favorable committee report on SB 436.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Discussions on the report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 436 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. All right, Senators, we've got a special order calendar with executive nominations. Let's go ahead there. That's special order calendar number 18. The clerk will read the first report.
Executive nominations report number 4. The question is, will the Senate advise and consent to the nominations of the executive?
Chair recognizes the chair of the Executive Nominations Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move favorable on the gubernatorial appointments in report number 4 of the Senate Executive Nominations Committee.
All right, the chairman recommends a favorable report from the committee. Senators, this is a full report. The question before the body is, will the Senate advise and consent to the nominations of the executive? Are there any nominations that members would like to separate out and vote independently? If not, any discussion? Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 42 votes in the affirmative, the Senate advises and consents affirmatively to the nominations of the executive. All right, we've got 2 more on this calendar. Let's go ahead and read the next bill.
Senate Bill 127, Senator Patterson, Institutions of Higher Education, Use of Criminal History and Admission Modifications. Question is on the adoption of the amendment offered from the floor by Senator Huff.
All right, Senators, the question before the body is on the the floor amendment offered by the senator from Frederick County. Chair recognizes the chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, this is the bill that tries to complete efforts to what's called ban the box. 3 or 4 years ago, we said if a university had its own application, they could not ask that question and decide admittance to the university or college based on that response. However, they could use information on criminal history to decide whether to
allow someone on the campus residency and housing. This bill, because we couldn't deal with what's called the common application, that means one that is used nationally. While we can't remove the question, we can tell the colleges and universities in Maryland they cannot use it to prohibit admission to a college. That's what this bill does, ladies and gentlemen. And many of these ex-offenders who are very motivated, and many who are black and brown, and many who actually finished their GED while in jail because they were so motivated. This bill is to address them. Unfortunately, the other day, the conversation sort of got transformed about risking my 18-year-old son or daughter's life on a college campus, or putting them in a room with someone who has a past history of violent behavior, and also calling it a social experiment run amok. The shift in focus is fairly ironic and not lost on many of us, where the focus was originally on people who were blocked from achieving a degree to protecting our young people on campus. That being said, Mr. President, this amendment, it might be duplicative. We could debate that. I don't think we need to do that. I've been known to be repetitive myself, and I've spoken with the sponsor of the bill, who feels fine. It doesn't hurt the basic premise of the bill, so the committee will accept the amendment.
All right, the chairman notes that the committee is a friendly amendment. Any further discussion on the amendment? If not, all in favor of the amendment say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 127 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 31, Senator Washington, Electricity and Gas Energy Suppliers Supply Offers. Question is on the adoption of the committee amendments and the favorable report.
Question is on the two committee amendments. Chair recognizes
Yes.
Senator from District 8.
Thank you. I would like to special order this until March 4th.
The senator has moved to special order the bill until March 4th. Chair recognizes the vice chair.
Yeah, can I just very quickly add, though, not an attempt to delay. I think we've had some great conversations with sponsor of the bill, and I think we have a path forward to avoid any kind of floor to fight. So we anticipate coming back with a modified committee amendment. So, Mr. President, thank you.
This is Senate of Maryland. This is what it looks like. All right. If there are no objections, the bill and the amendments will be special ordered to the appropriate time on March 4th. Okay, senators, I think we've done some heavy lifting today. Feels like it might be time to call it a day. That way we'll have we've got a bunch of third readers that we can just take everything we did today, pile them into a third reader calendar for Tuesday. So I think we call it. Let's go with committee announcements. Chair recognizes the Chair of Finance.
I hope that all members of Finance will have a good, productive weekend and come back re-energized.
Well said, Senator. Chair recognizes the Chair of Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs.
As with Finance, we encourage our committee members to get some rest. No meetings this afternoon.
Wonderful. All right. Chair recognizes the Chair of Budget and Tax.
No rest for the weary.
2:30 today, all three operating subcommittees are meeting. And then on Monday at 1:30, Health and Public Safety subcommittees will be meeting, and at 3, Education will be meeting.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chair recognizes the Chair of Judicial Proceedings.
Thank you, Mr. President. Hate to be a spoil sport, but we have bill hearings. Let's do 2:30, 5 bills. That's it.
JPR, working hard on a Friday. All right. Any other announcements? Yes, Chair recognizes the Chair of...
Mr. President?
No, this is
One
just...
sec. The Chair recognizes Senator from District 8.
Now, I just would like to say that there's a gentleman in this room that doesn't get to sit down as much as we do, and that's Jim the photographer, and I just appreciate him taking those pictures all the time, no matter where you are, what you're talking about, except right now, Jim. But thank you, Jim, and I think we need a round of applause.
Appreciate you. Thank you. All right. Yes, Chair recognizes the Chair of Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs.
Yeah, Mr. President, I failed to mention on Monday at 3 p.m. the Cybersecurity Work Group.
3:30.
At 3:30 on Monday, the cybersecurity work group will meet for a work session.
Excellent. All right. Other announcements? Other announcements. Chair recognizes the Chair of Protocol Committee.
Colleagues, I'd just like to acknowledge that today is 45. We have made it halfway through session.
Halfway.
I'd like to thank the president and the staff for keeping us safe this far. And there's a small token from the protocol committee on your way out because we are halfway there.
I want to thank the co-chairs of the protocol committees for pointing this out to us. I mean, the first half was so easy, so it's only going to get easier from here. Excellent. All right. One logistics that senators, you'll have a notice from Department of General Services about the James Senate Office Building. In order to have less persons entering offices, there is the option to not have cleaning service inside of the office. Members are being asked to take their trash cans and put them into the hallway by 4 p.m. each day, if this is how you would like to proceed. And then members are asked to put a note on the door that cleaning is not required inside of the office, should that be an option that senators wish to utilize. With that, let's go ahead and take clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. With 43 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland remains in session. The chair recognizes the majority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate of Maryland stand adjourned until Tuesday, March 2nd at 11 a.m.
Without objection, so ordered. Stay safe, wear your mask, get that vaccine.